I became an undertaker, I thought that the majority of the work that I did, that it would be about this weird and mysterious world of the dead, that I would be looking after them. I have access to the weird places where we keep our dead, where we collect them from. So I can now tell you that when you want to find a mortuary in a hospital, the best advice is to look for the bins or the chimneys, and there won't be a signpost. I also know that if you have to go to the mortuary at the coroner's office in Birmingham, you have to get very good at reversing round tiny little concrete pillars, negotiating 2 sets of gates, and potentially finding yourself bumping into the coroner's car on the way in. I also get to see behind the scenes at the crematorium. I know exactly how bones are turned into ash. And I know that that's the bit of my job that's the most interesting to most people. When I tell people what I do for a living, it's that sort of morbid curiosity that hooks them in. And I have learned some things. I have seen things that you probably haven't, and some things that are genuinely of interest to that morbid curiosity. But what I've realized most of all is that working with the dead and being an undertaker, there are no real magic tricks. There's just a little bit of sort of smoke and mirrors.
And so, as funeral directors, we have lots of little jobs that we have to do. And we have to do them in a really quick moment of time in order to get that funeral arranged. So things like ordering the right size coffin, things like booking the slot at the crematorium. We have to make sure that we get the right information on the nameplate, the coffin nameplate, so that when we take the coffin into the crematoria and it gets checked off, they know that we're actually bringing the right person in. We have to make sure that we get the doctor's signatures. Their doctors have to come, we have to contact them, they have to come to our premises, and they have to complete the right paperwork. We then have to get that paperwork from one place to another. It's actually quite an old-fashioned industry. We're trying to bring them into the digital age. But there's all these little things that we have to do. But actually, what we've discovered is that it's more than that. And actually, what we've discovered and what we've experienced about being good funeral directors is that it's more about moving paperwork from one place to another. It's even more than about looking after the dead. It's about focusing on the living, the people who are left behind. And we know that if we give them the space and the time to think and talk about what they want to do, and we help them build on their ideas, then we actually start to see the colour coming back into their cheeks, and we've actually seen people walking taller. So take Ali, for example. She was really struggling to arrange the funeral for her husband, Ed, and she just couldn't make any decisions. And then during our conversation, she happened to say, I just can't put Ed in a box. I couldn't put him in a box in life, so how can I put him in a box in death? And she also said, and I just really wish that he could make that walk one more time from our flat to the church. And I said, don't have to put him in a box. We can put him in a shroud. And also, if we bring him home, we can make that walk one more time because we can carry him and we can process from your flat to the church. And she started to smile during that conversation. And the thing is, people don't realise that they can go to these secret spaces that Carrie's been talking about. They don't realise that they can put the cardigan on their daughter one more time if that's what they want to do. And if you want to go, before you go to the crematorium, if you want to take one more visit into your mother's garden with the coffin and put the flowers that she has grown, and you want to sing lullabies that she used to sing to you, just like Marjorie's family did, then you can do that too.
So you don't always realise that you can. Can I put my dad in the coffin for the final time? Can I be the one that screws on the lid? I don't mind if I have to come to your mortuary. I don't mind. You can show me how to use the hoist so it's safe. Can I be the minister at my mum's funeral? I don't think that there's anybody else who can give a good account of her life. I think I'm the best person to do that for her. Can I walk in front of the car like the funeral director? I think I'd really like to do that. I'd like to walk that final journey with my nan. Can I? Can I bury my dad in his field? I think that's the best place for him to go. I think he'd really like that. Can I carry the coffin? Because I'm a girl and I don't know if girls are allowed to carry the coffin. These are all real questions that we've been asked. And the answer to all of those questions is, of course you can.
And the thing is, people just don't think it's possible to do any of these things, and they think they have to ask permission. So why is that? Well, imagine you've been trudging in and out of the hospital for months on end. You've been told by doctors what you can and what you can't do. All these people and officials in uniform have been telling you things. They've been in control of all the information, when you get it. You don't know what you're going to hear, when that's going to happen. And you've been dancing on eggshells for months, trying to avoid the inevitable. And then the worst happens. And even though you knew it was coming, you're still in shock. And you're surrounded by a cloud of grief. And then somebody tells you, you've got to arrange the funeral, you've got to appoint a funeral director. And there's a whole load more people in uniforms that are telling you all the things you need to do, and that you've got to do everything, and you don't even know what everything is because you've never even talked about a funeral. You've got to do it all really quickly. So knowing all of that, having experienced all of that, where on earth do you get the strength and the courage to stop that carousel and do it in a way that helps you to rethink and do something that's right for you?
We've seen even those people who thought they knew what to do, who had those conversations, can lose the confidence to do it at the time when it happens. I met a lady called Mary. Her husband was dying. She was looking after him at home. They knew that he was going to die. And all of the conversations that they'd had and their family had had were about making sure that he wasn't whisked away to a funeral director's, that they were still looking after him at home after he died and before his burial, which was going to take place a couple of days later. But on the day that it happened, the doctor turned up at the house, certified the death, and I got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning asking me to come and take him. Can you come and take him away? Now, based on the fact that we'd had an extensive conversation about how important it was for them to keep him at home and to look after him, have that continuity of care, in the midst of the madness of somebody dying, she still felt impelled to ring us and sort of forgot what it was that had meant so much to her. So I suggested that she had a cup of tea. I reminded her of the conversation that we'd had and said, you just sit down for a little while, take a deep breath and come to terms with what has happened. And if you still want us in an hour or an hour and a half to come and pick him up, then of course we will. At 7:30, I got a call saying, oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of the thing that we needed to do. Thank you of reminding me that how important it was for him not to be whisked off by the undertaker. And thank you for enabling us to keep him at home like we planned.
And the thing is, actually, when somebody dies, there's very little that you have to do. You have to register the death within 5 days, and you have to lawfully dispose of the body. Beyond that, you don't have to really do anything. You don't even need a funeral director. And you don't even have to have a funeral.
But if you do decide to have a funeral, you can essentially have the funeral that works for you and the people around you. Quite early on in this job, we got a call from a lady who was in awful anguish and distress. Her son had died very suddenly away at university at the age of 19. He was a fit and healthy young man. She could not comprehend the idea of having a traditional funeral, of going to the crematorium, of going to church, of having that be the process that she was going through. And that, not understanding what was possible, was adding layers of distress to an already distressing situation. So we sat down and we talked about her son, and we talked about his friends. And we found out that he loved football. That's what he did. He was sporty. And so we had his funeral, not in the crematorium or a church or even at a graveyard. We had his funeral at a sports centre. And what we did is he was in his coffin, and his friends spent time writing messages and leaving photographs and even having selfies with the coffin, all the time coming to terms with the fact that their friend was in the room with them. And then they all got changed into their kit, and they went out and had a football match in his honour on the field. And he was on the sidelines, the most important member of the crowd that they've ever played a match in front of. And the thing is that that was the right thing, both for his family and his friends. It meant that we weren't forced into watching 19-year-olds try and sing hymns in a church, because that wasn't the right thing for them to do, and that wasn't the best way for them to say goodbye to a friend who had died in such awful circumstances.
And then there was Tom. And he was really struggling to come to the terms with the idea of taking his father to a crematorium. So I said to him, "Where do you want to go?" And he kind of chuckled to himself and went, "I just want to take him to the pub." So I said, "Why not?" So there we are in the pub car park, and everybody's coming in and out, and there's music playing inside, and all his photos are on the slideshow, and people are coming out, and they're chatting, and they're singing. And every now and then somebody hops in the car and has a one-to-one, personal one-to-one, sits and chats. And then as lots of little gifts are being left on the coffin, his favourite tipple, a rose, a rolled-up cigarette. When all that's done, we quietly slipped away and took him on his own, without any fuss, to the crematorium. And the thing is, it's not always easy to get to that kind of light bulb moment of what it is that you need to do. I've had lots of meetings with families, and sometimes we're there 2 or 3 hours, and we still haven't got to a decision at the end of it. But what we have done by that point is we've sat down and we've really started to unpick what's important.
What we have learned is providing that kind of level of emotional and practical support to people at a really difficult time. It's really knackering. You're developing a relationship with people that can be really important in a really short amount of time. And the one thing that we do know is that it doesn't always happen in office hours. People think this job is tricky because of the dead people, because of the things I was talking about earlier that people think are strange and weird and they don't think they could ever do. But I'm going to be honest with you. The hardest thing is dealing with the people who are living and supporting them through a really, really difficult time. I'm not making out that we're saviours here. We can't make a sad thing not be sad. What we can do is hopefully make it a little bit better an experience and make sure that the right decisions are being made. And we know that this works, and we've seen this. So, to conclude, we're going back to the theme of today. And I think if you ever find yourself in the unfortunate situation of having to engage with a funeral director, I want you to think beyond the box. You're not just buying a coffin. You're not just asking somebody to look after your dead person for you. You're potentially asking them to look after you too. Thank you.